Alright, hello Bio, this is Mr. B, and we are starting Chapter 8 today. This chapter is focusing on photosynthesis, so if we don't know what that process is, you're going to find out here in the next couple days. But the first section in this chapter is titled Energy and Life. So we're going to take a look at how living things obtain energy to survive and to kind of just carry out all their necessary processes. So we're just going to jump right in with saying that living things need energy to survive. That's pretty basic. We all know that the food that we eat is what kind of keeps us going. It gives us energy. So we all need energy to survive. And this energy comes from food, and the energy in most food comes from the sun. So we talked about, if you see this heading up here, autotrophs and heterotrophs, you all went out and we all observed each one of those types of organisms. Remember the difference between those two. If you can't remember, we'll go over them in a second. So even though heterotrophs are kind of consuming their own food, the energy that comes from their food all comes from the sun. And so then where do plants get the energy they need to produce food? Plants and some other types of organisms are able to use light energy from the sun to produce food. So the sun, they literally just sit out there, they soak up the sun, and inside their body they make food. Now, a couple people in class said, well, humans make their own food by cooking food. That's not what we're talking about. They literally build their own food inside of themselves. We do not just sit out in the sun and take in light and then we're full. No, we actually have to go out and we have to get it from some type of other organism. So we cannot do this. Only plants and a few other select type of organisms. And so the organisms, such as plants, which make their own food, are called autotrophs. So remember, we all saw what the autotrophic organisms outside, the ones that are plants. And then organisms such as animals, and as well as animals, fungi are thrown into that group as well, that must obtain energy from the foods they consume, are heterotrophs. So just try to remember those two terms. Autotroph is make your own food from the sun, and heterotroph is when you have to consume something else or you just cannot make your own food. And how this energy is how energy relates to all this, I guess I would say, is that we all need energy, and energy comes in many forms, including light, heat, and electricity. So light energy is going to be the main one that we're going to talk about, and energy can be stored in chemical compounds too. So we're going to talk about in this chapter how we can take energy from light, being the sun, and we're going to talk about how we store it in chemical compounds. And then the important chemical compound that the cells use to store and release energy is known as adenosine triphosphate, or simply abbreviated as ATP. So hopefully we've heard this, maybe at least heard of this before, but if not, you're going to hear plenty about it for now. And ATP is used by all types of cells, so plants, humans, bacteria, basically anything, as their basic energy source. So all energy inside the cell is coming from ATP. And ATP, this is what it looks like, kind of breaking it down on a molecular level. It consists of adenine, which is this green area right here, ribose, which is this kind of pale grayish area, and 3 phosphate groups. So these 3 phosphate groups on the end are going to be the most important. As you can see, our next slide here says the 3 phosphate groups are the key to the ATP's ability to store and release energy. So again, going back, these 3 phosphate groups on the end are going to be the most important part. And the reason why they're the most important part we'll see in a second, but we're just going to talk about how this setup kind of helps the cell store energy. So ADP, which is right here on the left, is almost exactly the same as our main one, ATP, over here on the right, but there's just one tiny little difference. There's just one little extra phosphate group on ATP. And so a cell can store small amounts of energy by simply adding a phosphate group to ADP. So just sticking that little P on the end of there gives us, the analogy they use here is a partially charged battery. So right here on the left with ADP, we only have a partially charged battery, but just by adding that phosphate group on, now we have a fully charged battery. So I guess another comparison would be, this would maybe be your cell phone right here on the left. Just doesn't have really quite enough juice to do anything or to do what you want. However, you plug it in, the energy, adding on the phosphate group gives you a fully charged battery, so now you can text in class or whatever it is you all do. So pretend that it is a battery. So with ATP, we have a fully charged battery. And then when we release the energy, so releasing the energy would maybe be like using your cell phone, the energy stored in the ATP is released by breaking the chemical bond between the second and third phosphates. So we'll watch what happens when this bond is broken. So you can see there, you had some energy, or we had a little energy usage, and now we're back to ADP. So put it in terms maybe you guys can understand. Let's say you're just downloaded a new app, so you had to get it, the fully charged battery, you download the app, that takes energy, and it breaks, and now you're back to your partially charged battery, your ADP. So that is how ATP and ADP help us with our energy storage. And so we're going to look at what is the role of ATP inside the cell or in cellular activities. So the energy from ATP is needed for many cellular activities, including active transport, which we just talked about those, endocytosis and exocytosis, protein synthesis, which we will get to in later chapters, and muscle contraction, which might be more of an anatomy physiology topic. And ATP's characteristics make it exceptionally useful as the basic energy source of all cells. So anything that goes on in the cell is going to require ATP to kind of make it go. And most cells only have a small amount of ATP because it's not a good way to store large amounts of energy. So we only have as much as we really need. It's not really like a big energy storage area. It's more of just for us using energy. And cells can regenerate ATP from ADP as needed by using the energy in foods like glucose. So as long as we keep our cells powered with this energy, with the food, then we'll have enough ATP to go around. So just keep that in mind, that we don't have a lot of it, but we can always make as much as we need as long as we give ourselves the right amount of energy. So that is it for that, and if you have any questions, let me know.